It's a weekend of celebration, so let's make some mini Victoria sponge cakes. Welcome back, bakers. It's Angela from Bake Angel, and this is a special celebratory weekend for us. Not only is it the Queen of England's Platinum Jubilee, but it is also the second birthday of this YouTube channel. And I personally would love to thank you for supporting my channel, sticking with me with my videos over the 2 years, and also for liking and subscribing and commenting on my videos as well. So today we're going to make some dairy-free mini Victoria sponge cakes, which are a family favorite, especially if you're from the UK, which we are originally. So let's dive in and see how these are made. So first of all, we're going to start off with a great tip if you ever want to make a mini version of cakes, and we're actually going to use our cupcake or muffin pan for that. As you can see here, I'm going ahead and I'm greasing each of those 12 areas of the cupcake pan really liberally with some butter, and this is plant-based butter because this is a dairy-free recipe. Just use regular butter if you're not dairy-free, and you want to make sure that the whole of that area is greased. We don't want to use cupcake liners with a mini cake because we don't want to have any sort of indentation from the cupcake liner, which would spoil the outside appearance of the cake. Once you've greased all of that, the next thing you want to do is go ahead and add flour to it. So grease and flour will actually stop that cake batter sticking to it so that it makes it really difficult to come out. This is essentially just a way of adding another layer of protection, and if you were normally baking a larger cake, you would use parchment paper for that instead. But as you can imagine, lining cupcake pans with parchment paper would be a bit of a nightmare, so the flour and grease technique is much easier. Added about a teaspoon of flour to each one. Then as you can see, I am really shaking it around, making sure that all the areas are covered, and then you just take it over to your garbage bin and dump out the excess flour. So now we can go on to actually making the batter for the Victoria sponge. This is a really simple recipe, a very basic one from the UK that a lot of people use for their larger cakes, like an 8-inch or a 9-inch sponge. But as I say, you can turn that into cupcakes quite easily. So we've started off with 175 grams of white sugar and 175 grams of unsalted room temperature plant-based butter. Again, you can use regular dairy butter if you're not dairy free. You're going to mix those together just for, I guess, about 30 seconds until they're nice and combined, and it just softens it up slightly. Then in a separate bowl, we're going to add our wet ingredients, which is 3 eggs, which are also at room temperature, and a splash of vanilla bean paste as well. You can see here that I didn't measure it, I eyeballed it, but I guess if you were wanting to measure it, you would want about a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste, or you could use vanilla extract instead if you prefer to use that. Give them a stir together to beat those eggs up, and then we're going to add that to our butter and sugar mix just a little bit at a time. Otherwise, if you tend to add too much liquid to the sugar and butter mix in one go, it could actually curdle. So to prevent that from happening, I just either do it in 2 additions or 3 additions, and I'm just doing 3 this time. You can see again, I'm mixing it not for very long with my hand mixer. Again, as I always say in my recipes, you could absolutely make this in a stand mixer as well if you prefer to do that. This does come together very quickly though, so don't worry if you don't have a stand mixer. And of course you could do it by hand as well if you wanted to. So that is nice and combined. You can see how lovely and light this mixture is as well. It doesn't have a deep yellow color, just a very pale color, and that is very similar to what it will be like once it's baked as well. And now it's time to add the last ingredient, which is our self-raising flour, and straight away you'll notice here I'm not mixing it together with my hand whisk. I'm actually folding it in with a silicone spatula, and again I'm adding a little bit at a time. The reason I'm folding it in is we don't want to over mix our cake batter at this stage, because that can actually affect the way that they bake and the rise in them as well. And as I always mention, whenever I use self-raising flour in my recipes, you can make it yourself if you can't find it in the store, and you can find the link below in the description for my video explaining how to make your own self-raising flour. Lastly, now we're going to go ahead and add our cake batter into our prepared muffin pan. Remember again, as I said in the beginning, we're actually going to bake these in a cupcake pan without liners so that they will replicate a larger cake and have really nice straight sides for us. I'm using my regular ice cream scoop for this, which is also linked in the description below as well. And you just want to keep going. I usually do 1 scoop per pan, and then I'll even out any of the leftovers at the end, which you can see me doing here. You don't want to waste any of that gorgeous cake batter. Once they're all filled, you're going to take that tray, tap it on the counter just to make sure there's no air stuck in them, and it helps level it out as well. Then you're going to pop them in your preheated oven at 320 degrees Fahrenheit for around 20 minutes. Now once those cakes are done, they come out looking like this. They are well risen. They're not that domed either, which is perfect for this kind of cake. And they are slightly golden as well. So these are perfect. They smell amazing as well. Now I'm going to let them cool completely in the tin before I remove them. And you can see here, I've just set up a little tray on the side with some parchment paper on it. And then I'm just teasing them out of the pan slightly with a regular spatula. They probably would come out on their own, but I find this just helps to ease them off slightly without having to spoil the shape of them, which we really want to retain that lovely shape that they've baked as well. Don't they look wonderful? So that's half of them done. I'm just going to go ahead and take the rest of them out, and then we will go ahead and move on to the next stage, which is making our vegan buttercream. Now for a Victoria sponge cake, you have a couple of options. You can either use a whipped cream for it, and I do have a gorgeous recipe for vegan whipped cream, or you can make just a regular buttercream, which is what we're doing here. So I started off with adding 113 grams of unsalted plant-based butter, and I just softened that up a little bit with my hand mixer, and then to that I've added 225 grams of icing sugar. Now it's up to you whether you want to sift your icing sugar or not. I tend not to for this because the icing sugar I buy is actually pre-sifted. It never has any lumps in it, but definitely go ahead and sieve yours if it tends to clump together. Last thing then, to thin it down slightly so we can spread it, we're going to add a little bit of liquid to it. You'll notice that I've said that you should add about a tablespoon. The amount that you actually end up using from that tablespoon though will depend on the humidity in your kitchen. Now it was quite warm when I made this, so I ended up only using about 2 teaspoons of water until we got a really nice spreadable consistency, as you can see here. That's perfect. So now we can go ahead and finally start building our mini Victoria sponge cakes. You're just going to take each of those mini cakes and cut them in half with a straight knife, as you can see here. Look how beautiful they look inside as well. I can't wait to try these. Once you've cut them all up, it's then simply a case of adding some of that gorgeous buttercream on it. I'm just using a tapered spatula for that, as I find it's easier for me to do it. You could do it on a mini turntable if you wanted to, but honestly I find it easier to just pick them up and hold them in my hand and spread it on as if you were either buttering toast or spreading cream onto a scone. And then a little dollop of some raspberry jam in the middle. Pop that top on, and that's the Victoria sponge almost done. One last thing though is we are going to go ahead, and to make it more traditional, we're going to put some icing sugar on it. So I'm just doing a nice dusting of icing sugar on top, as you can see here, and that finishes it off wonderfully. And the important bit, and I know this is the bit you always love to see, this is what it looks like inside, and you did get a sneak peek of this at the start of the video, so thanks for sticking with this. You can see there's a great ratio of buttercream to jam and sponge as well. These are so light and fluffy, and they taste amazing too. Thanks ever so much for watching this video, and thanks again for supporting my channel for the last 2 years. Make sure you check out this baking playlist for more of my baking videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.